one of the things often people keep on saying, why do you keep on covering the Conservative Party? And I will say this now, until the coroner, shall we say, delivers the final verdict, the party is not dead. But there is lots of stuff going on in like the internal workings of the Conservative Party, all this kind of stuff, which indicate things are not going well. Things are not going well. And as I've said before, I think we are witnessing very, very much so a death of a party we haven't seen in our UK political system for decades, years. Close to, I think, almost 100 years since like the death of like the Liberal Party. Going back, to like the 20s, something like that. So it is insane to say that we are seeing this, something that does not happen that too many and often in our political systems, but other countries that happen quite regularly. But that is where we are. That is where we are, and where we're seeing this. And we have often seen, as we've covered, how bad things are going for the Conservative Party. One of the things that often gets brought up, but never gets, too much looked into, is the financial state of CCHQ. Some people have said, it's pretty bad. Other people, to the financial situation of CCHQ is absolutely dire. So what is the real financial situation of the CCHQ, the central body that pretty much controls and funds and organizes a whole range of other, conservative, functions? What happens if all of a sudden that is bankrupt? That, things aren't, shall we say, the best, shall we say there. And you have now this guy on Conservative Rome who has sort of done his own external, shall we say, investigation of the finances of CCHQ. So take this very, very much with a pinch of salt. Of course, he may be wrong. He may not know, or at least he doesn't seem to know, of course, the full, what the CCHQ books actually look like, what's going on in those books. It's one of those things where when you see this type of thing, you look and go, that's kind of fascinating that someone who on the outside can look at all that information and go, yeah, things aren't that very good. So we're going to have a look at this because this is kind of fascinating to see. Very fascinating to see on this front. So, as always, before we do go looking into this, please do remember to click on like, share, and of course, the subscribe button down below. Of course, there is the Patreon page, the One Foundation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can all buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, let's crack on then into this. Conservative Home. Joe Egerton is now fond of Leith back in 1992. He has now 30 years of experience in regulatory compliance, having obtained one of the highest ever marks in the accounting special paper of the Oxford Management Studies. So here you have a professional accountant regulator having a look at what information he can find, or at least what public information the Conservative Party has found. So let's see what this guy has to say on this. But to say that he's saying, as the title says of the article says, CCHQ is living on the edge, I think you can see things could be quite bad for CCHQ. So, some readers of Conservative Home may be taking comfort from the press reports to the effect that the Conservative Party raised twice as much as Labour in the last quarter of 2024. Do not be misled. The financial position of CCHQ is dire, a legacy of the over-centralized structure that we adopted after 1997. The good news is that the financial collapse of CCHQ offers an opportunity to rebuild a national party. In recent years, CCHQ has typically spent over 2.5 million each month In government, research and communications were, of course, bolstered by a small army of SPADs, that's special advisors, who must have cost a great deal more than the 500k a month now provided to the opposition in the short and Kanban money. In the last quarter of 2024, the Electoral Commission showed that the Conservative and Unionist Party has received a total of 3.8 million. However, 1.5 million was money paid by the House of Commons, that's short money, and the House of Lords, the carbon money, and the Scottish Parliament to fund Kimmy Badenoch's office and support research and travel costs for frontbench shadow ministers and SMPs. Of the remainder, 238k was then received by constituency associations and 230k was then in the form of cash donations. CCHQ thus received in cash a total of 1.5 million in donations, or 500k a month. So there you go, a quick breakdown. Although I don't think necessarily that might be the full picture, as he goes on to say later. This, of course, does not include money from donors who have given less than £11,000 in, of course, the calendar year. But that may be inflated by including some donations actually made in earlier quarters. Looking at the data for the year as a whole, this implies that CCHQ's total income in 2024 was less than half of what it had spent in non-election years of 2020, 2021, and 2022. So their total income was completely halved. Completely halved on that. Like I say, this does not look good. This amount of stuff does not look good on this. And bear in mind, this is someone who clearly is an accountant looking in on what information is publicly available and already doesn't look quite like, shall we say, that good. So the labyrinthine corporate structure currently of the party makes, of course, a detailed analysis of how we got into this mess. Very challenging. Moreover, of course, the most recent published accounts for the year ending on the 31st December 2023 tell us, of course, a good deal. All of the proceeds from the sale of 23 Smith Square, the building that many of us will remember as the party now owned outright, have gone. They went into a company called the C&UCO Properties Limited. Quote, properties. Properties then, quote, lent the money to CCHQ without, according to note 11 in the 2021 accounts, meaning a formal loan or agreement or infallible means for CCHO to repay the loan. Things get interesting now. Properties, of course, had to be declared the loan impaired, which, of course, is accountant speak for gone. Or, as Boris might put it, spaffed up the wall. This now has to find around 250k a year in respect for dilapidations clause, which is operating now a lease land and buildings. Note 10 to the 2023 accounts showed that the December 2023 properties had a minimum lease payments due to, quote, under non-cancelable operating leases, or £9,818,000 due, of course, in 2024, with a further over 1,500,000 between 2025 and 2030. Note, of course, that these are stated obligations would be recovered from CCHQ, who said our auditors, of course, lacked a sense of humor. So they privatized, if I am getting this right, according to this guy, they privatized a building they own, which now they then rented out to the company that they may have created. I'm not sure if they do own that or not. I'm not 100% sure. It hasn't said on that. And now that company looks like it will not be able to repay that loan from CCHQ. At least that's my reading of that. I may be wrong. Like I say, that type of property stuff isn't sort of in my usual remit, but seems to be quite a lot of money they may not be able to do. So CCHQ, of course, does not have to publish its own separate accounts. It is required to, of course, file accounts for the year ending on the 31st December with the Electoral Commission, published, of course, every September. What CCHQ actually files for are accounts which are then consolidate, of course, the income and expenditure and the assets and liabilities of itself, properties, and those of another company, the Conservative Party Foundation Limited. Quote, the foundation, all under, of course, the name of the Conservative Central Office. The foundation, of course, receives legacies, most recently over 10 million from the estate of Lord David Salisbury. Article 3.1.3.3 of the foundation's articles severely, of course, limits to CCHQ, effectively to a 1 million a year. Paragraph 7 of the foundation's 2023 accounts records that 10.2 million is, of course, currently held in ring-fenced accounts, subject to even now further restrictions. So that is a heck of a lot of money that people leave, of course, in their will to the Conservative Party. And there is, by the sounds of it, I would suspect, or at least given that information that says there, I would suspect there is a lot of money ring fenced that they can't use. But maybe that is what will keep the Conservative Party propped up, quite possibly for many years to come. I think that is what their lifeline is. The fact that they have all these legacies, maybe sat there waiting, but as you see, they can only take so much a year from that. But will that even though be able to keep them propped up forever? Who knows? Who knows on that? Of course, the filed accounts for the Conservative and, of course, Central Office signed off back in May of 2024 did show that the net assets of at least 18 million back in the 31st of December 2023. This is misleading. Although the section 43, paragraph 6 of the PELFA, the Political Parties Referendum Act, provides for the Electoral Commission to make, of course, regulations of auditing party accounts, but it has not done so. CCHQ apparatchiks have now taken advantage of this omission to produce consolidated accounts treating the foundation's assets as available to CCHQ. This is how they generated the figure of 18 million. So this guy is saying that because the Electoral Commission has not audited like the Conservative Party accounts, they have been up to some creative accounting. At least that's my take on it on that. The strict application of the usual accounting standards, FRS 102, would of course not allow this. If the Electoral Commission had insisted that FRS 102 be applied with at least rigor, then the accounts would have only shown the net assets of 1.2 million. CCHQ is, of course, now in a very dangerous position financially. Donations last year have been very disappointing, with expenditure very considerable, and time is running out. Provided that CCHQ pays its debts when it is due, and if they fail to, it would have problems from satisfying a court that it actually passed the test in section 224, paragraph 2 of the Insolvency Act of 1986. It has until July to produce these accounts. The auditors will then have to confirm that CCHQ and properties are now both, quote, going concerns. And unless massive spending cuts are actually achieved or much of the money actually raised, this will be challenging. So this guy thinks that in a couple of months' time, CCHQ is not going to be able to pay its debts, which will then cause the auditors to come in and who knows, that's when other interesting things might start to, shall we say, happen as well on that front. Like I say, mark July in your calendars. Things could get very interesting on that financial front if this guy is right, and that CCHQ is in a very, very precarious state. So let's finish this off then. They also may be an issue now over the covenants between the properties and, of course, CCHQ's landlords. This is, of course, an unexplained item in the comprehensive income statement on page 8 of the property accounts for 2023. Namely, of course, a combination of reduction in debt owed by CCHQ and almost now an equal surge in administrative expenses, which rose from £21,000 in 2022 to, Jesus Christ, how could you go from admin expenses in almost the course of a year from £21,000 to 1,813,000? That's insane. That's an insane amount of increase on administrative expenses. This is, of course, an increase of 8,494%. This leaves me now in no doubt that the relationship between CCHQ and properties is very complex, to say the least. Oh, dear. So, yeah, this guy, as I said, clearly is an independent accountant. He does a lot of that stuff. Take it with a pinch of salt. But of course, currently what he's read is everything that is publicly available. CCHQ has its own, accounts. We'll find out, of course, I think in a couple of months' time. I say, looking at my wrist with no watch on whatsoever, but we'll find out probably in a couple of months' time what happens here. I think you could see. I think you could see some very, very, very bad financial state. And bear in mind, this is one of the things that whenever we hear people talking about the bad state of the Conservative Party, this is one of the things that they bring up, but they never go into too much detail about. This guy has gone into detail. And I'm not an accountant. I don't have a lot of dealings with that world. But it seems to me that, as you said there, things are very complex. There may be a possibility that CCHQ cannot then pay back its loans or the debt that is currently owed to that company. Hey, things could be very interesting. Things could get very interesting on that front. Things could get very interesting on that front for sure. So let me know what you think to all this, because this very, very much implies a party that is not just in political trouble, but is potentially entering a very deep financial trouble, at least by the sounds of that article. Now, of course, we don't know, of course, the full details. Even he was going on everything that is, publicly available to accounts, from 2023. So who knows? Who knows the real depth of what's really going on there? But it keeps on coming up that, Conservative Party, the financials are in a bit of a tumultuous time, shall we say, to be fair to them. I say to be fair, but yeah, things aren't looking good. Things are not looking good on that front. So let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.